All right. The first assignment that I'm transferring is the discourse analysis. The goal of this was to pick out a topic and then to analyze the discourse surrounding that topic. The topic I chose was The Godfather Part 2. And here's my discourse analysis. Since its release in 1972, The Godfather has been a cultural phenomenon. There have been many films that have tried to replicate its tone, themes, and writing to varying effect, but the overall consensus is that the only movie that even comes close that is in the same mafia genre is its sequel, The Godfather Part 2, which was released just 2 years after the first. Both films have won Best Picture in 1973 and 1975 respectively, and sit comfortably in IMDb's top 5 greatest films of all time. Amen. Both films have had a massive impact on cinema history since their releases and are especially respected for Francis Ford Coppola's first films as a director, which is just insane. Many audiences go as far to say that they are the greatest movies of all time, including 3 different people who wrote articles about how and why they think so. The first person who holds this opinion is Geraldo Valero, who said in his article Why The Godfather Part 2 is the best of the trilogy, that when he rewatches both films annually, quote, the impact of the sequel is invariably stronger than that of its predecessor, end quote. The language he uses throughout the article is very personal, with him going into detail about how both films stand above all other films. He primarily is speaking to an audience who has not seen Part 2 and wants to try to convince them to give it a chance, as well as an audience who has seen it and might not agree with him, and as he tries to change their mind. One of his points is how the film uses what would have been its weaknesses as strengths. Many important characters died in the original Godfather, including its deuteragonist, don't know how to say that word, Vito Corleone, leaving only Michael Corleone, his wife Kay, and adopted brother Tom Hagen as the only characters that the movie could really focus on. He argues that even though the sequel would not have the acting of Marlon Brando, who played Vito, the film uses flashbacks to show the rise of Vito, now played by Robert De Niro, who some argue is just as good. He, as Geraldo says in his article, does not miss a beat. He brings up another example, this time of a character who survived till the end, Clemenza. Due to scheduling conflicts, the actor who played Clemenza in the first film could not appear in the sequel and was replaced by another character, Frank Pentangeli, played by Michael Gazzo. Geraldo argues that the film expertly connects the audience with this new character through his relationship with Clemenza and uses him to build up the story as well. Quote, at the end, Gazzo's Frank Five Angels Pentangeli turned out to be just as memorable as his predecessor, end quote. Another article that holds the same opinion about The Godfather Part 2, that The Godfather Part 2 is the best movie of all time. The author Cassandra Burke is again trying to convince an audience who has not seen it before to watch it. She hypes up the film by stating about how it is... she hypes up the film by stating about how it is about, quote, absolute power corrupts absolutely in the case of Michael Corleone, end quote. The film has a much darker tone than the first film, where everyone who has wronged Michael has been taken down and now he sits at the top. In the second film, Michael kills those who have wronged him, but is no longer out of necessity. Hyman Roth, the main antagonist of the film, has very little time left anyway due to cancer, and then Frank Pentangeli would have spent the rest of his life in witness protection, disgraced from the mob, and his brother Fredo would have tried to make things up to Michael after his betrayal. In the end, Michael chose to take each of them out. In contrast with the first film, it ends with Michael physically being at the top, but emotionally he is lower than he has ever been before. The only family that he has left is Tom, but even then their relationship is strained. Everyone else who is either dead or has left him. He sits in a chair alone while contemplating. The author goes on to explain how the writing of the sequel's protagonist, Michael, is used to affect everyone in the story and how they all end up being at their lowest by the end, just like Michael. Cassandra ends the article by bringing up the 2 main betrayals that Michael suffers from the hands of Fredo and Kay. The first film also had betrayals, but nothing on the same level shown in Part 2. The betrayals in the sequel are a lot more personal, with them coming from his brother who nearly got him assassinated, and from his wife who killed their unborn child. None of the portrayals in the first film hit as hard because the audience has not spent nearly as much time with them as with the characters in part 2. The language the author uses to enforces her want to convince her audience of her point by diving into detail about each portrayal and saying that, quote, like Fredo, Kay's rebellious act against Michael is a morally ambiguous one, end quote. Cassandra explains the hypocrisy of those who sided with against Kay when she aborted the child, while siding with Michael when he planned the assassinations of the heads of the 5 families of New York and of his brother-in-law, Carlo. That is another contrast with the first film, where every betrayal was portrayed as wrong. Michael faces a lot of betrayal in both films, and the contrast between both films is what is said to enhance the second film above all others. Every betrayal leads to Michael no longer trusting anyone by the end of Godfather Part 2, echoing what Paulie Walnuts Gualtieri from The Sopranos said, quote, "How much more betrayal can I take?" End quote. This ending gives the audience a feeling of uncertainty as to how ruthless Michael is going to be from now on. The only people besides himself that he could be doing any of this for are his children. He is more emotionally cold than he has ever been. In the final article titled Sins of the Father, The Godfather Part 2, Larry Wallace goes into detail about the making of Godfather Part 2. The language he uses is historical and tries to inform an audience who has not seen the second film, as well as an audience who has seen both films, about how important this film is. Quote, "People weren't calling them franchises back then, and the sequel was a foreign concept," end quote. He talks about how while films have had sequels in the past, they were very few and far between, and Part 2 is what really started the trend. He argues it was one of the first sequels, if not the first sequel, to best its predecessor. Just like Francis Ford Coppola's other movies, the filming was hectic, to say the least. One of the original film's creators had a falling out with him, but was eventually convinced to come back. The actor for Clemenza, as I said before, was not able to return. The studio producing the film, Paramount, was not confident in it since it was a sequel. The runtime of the film was longer than the first, which meant the budget would be higher, which just added to the hardships faced by the director. Larry's language does not change throughout the article as he continues to try and inform the audience about the making of the film. All in all, the discourse surrounding The Godfather Part 2 is very similar throughout, with most saying it is one of, if not the best film ever put to screen. The awards that both films have won, give both a film a hint of prestige in the cinema, where they are not looked at in the same lens as modern superhero films. This duology of films has been held as the pinnacle of cinema for decades now. Many question whether there will ever be any films that could even top them. Most of the discourse was social, with a little being historical when talking about the making of the film. Now, this assignment was important to me because I will use the knowledge I gained from this to influence both my professional life and my personal life. I'm a big movie buff, so this affects my personal life by allowing me to think more critically about films, and then it affects my professional life because as I go into an educational field, it allows me to think more critically about like articles and like other subjects that I will be teaching.